Welcome everybody to Common Workflows in QuickBooks Online. We have a 1-hour webinar here. My name is M.B. Raymundi, and I am a CPA from Trumbull, Connecticut. Certified in anything Intuit will let me certify in, so advanced in both desktop and QuickBooks Online, enterprise point of sale. I've been teaching for over 15 years, both to end users and to folks like yourself, so pro advisors, consultants, things like that. I love the teaching, love QuickBooks, always happy when Intuit asks me to present, and so I'm very happy to be here with you today. This webinar does qualify for continuing education credit, so in order to receive it, you have to stay for the entire webinar. I will give you a CPE keyword during the webinar, and then towards the end or at the end of the webinar, you'll be prompted to, there'll be a poll that pops up, and you'll be prompted to select the correct keyword, and then you get emailed a certificate to you about 3 weeks from today's training, and it's sent to the same email address that you used to register for the training. You might want to add accountant_training@intuit.com to your approved email sender file, or check your spam folder. And I would encourage you, even if you don't need it for continuing education credit, to go ahead and fill it in, because then you have a certificate saying that you have attended the Common Workflows in QuickBooks Online. So how cool would that be? Very cool, right? So the whole idea of this webinar, a lot of us are familiar with QuickBooks Online, and a lot of us are familiar also with QuickBooks Desktop. And in QuickBooks Desktop, I don't know about you, but I know when I train people to use Desktop, I have them use the home page, because that gives the workflow what a common workflow would be in Desktop. So, you know, you invoice, you receive payment, you make a deposit, you enter bills, you pay bills, you know, things like that. We don't have that same kind of home page in QuickBooks Online, and a lot of us are struggling on how to move around in QuickBooks Online. Where do we find things in QuickBooks Online? So we're not really sure how to teach our clients. So the idea today is we will talk about the general navigation, and then we'll talk about some workflows. It's not the end-all or be-all. You may come up with a different workflow for your clients, but we'll go through just utilizing the banking center. Cash people, you know, cash basis taxpayers, they connect their credit cards and their bank accounts, and they record things in QuickBooks. No payables, no receivables, you know, very simple. Then we'll go through some purchasing workflows and sales workflows, and then we'll talk about accountant tools that help our workflow when we're working in a client file. So general navigation with QuickBooks Online, and you probably already know this, but I'm going to go over it anyways, and I will flip back into QuickBooks Online. So general navigation, you should all be seeing my screen now, and I'm in the sample company. And you can always, either from QBOA, get to the sample company, or by just Googling QuickBooks Online sample company. I love it because, you know, when you get out of it and go back in, everything has been reset on there. So general navigation in QuickBooks Online there are kind of 3 places where you go to look to do things. One of them is this little plus key at the top, or the little plus X spinny wheelie thing. It is called Quick Create. And Quick Create is a great way to teach people how to use QBO, because when you have the expanded view, which you're seeing here, you have kind of all the transactions, almost all, pretty much all the transactions that are listed as to what parts of the company they are. So your customer transactions, your vendors, your employees, and then other transactions there. So that's one place to look on how to do things. Another place, which is not really for transactions, but to look how to do things in QBO, is to click on the gear icon. So the gear icon is where you set your company settings. So if you're a desktop user, what we know is preferences or company settings in QBO. So that we get to from the gear icon. We can get to the chart of accounts. We have our list, so including recurring transactions, our products and services, which is our items list, And then we have a list of all lists under our list column here. And then we have some tools. So here under the gear icon is where you're going to reconcile your bank account if you're not the accountant user, because we have another way we can do that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. If your client is using QBO Plus, this is where you can set up your budgets and then how you manage your company. So just general information about your account, adding new users, and then, of course, it's great we can give Intuit feedback, because the good thing about QBO is because it's subscription-based, we can see new features like every 4 to 6 weeks on there. And so if there's something that you really want to see in QBO, I would encourage you to give feedback and have your clients give feedback, because Intuit certainly reads all the feedback that we give in order to figure out what are the next features they're going to put into QBO. So we have Quick Create, we have our gear icon, and then the third place where we go is our navigation bar. So our left-hand navigation bar, we're on the client home right now. So I like the client home. It opens up when our client opens up their QBO file so that they can see, you know, what's going on with their income. They see this little donut chart on what their expenses are, and all these are clickable, quick zoomable. They have a little profit and loss graph on the bottom. And then on the right-hand side, if they have connected accounts, it will show up in here, the bank balance and the what's in QuickBooks. If it's not connected, you'll just see the bank accounts and the credit card accounts. And then you see activities. So it's a great place to start, just to kind of see what's going on with your file. And so I would encourage you to teach your clients the importance of looking at the home page, because I find that too many of our clients are not so good at looking at their reports, right? You know, it's kind of, if there's cash in the bank, I must be making money. And we all know that's not necessarily true on there. So this kind of gives them an idea of what's going on. And then our next three tabs that we have on the left-hand nav bar are really for our centers or our dashboards. And so we're in our customer dashboard here, and it's got this great money bar that goes across the top that not only gives really good information, so we have potential revenue, so estimates that haven't been invoiced or unbilled activity, either time or expenses or delayed charges. We have our AR, so how many open invoices and how many of them are overdue, and then what's been paid in the last 30 days. And then we have our listing of our customers. Now, one of the things I really like about the money bar is that I can use it to filter my customers down here. So let's say I want to send an email or a statement to my overdue customers. I can click on my overdue, and now I have just a listing of my overdue customers where I could check mark so that all of them would be selected. And under my batch action, I could say create a statement. Or individually, you know, I could send a reminder or receive payment or create other transactions related to that. This filtered view that I'm looking at is what they call sticky, very technical term there, meaning when I move out of my customer center and back in again, this is the view that I will still see. And then I can easily clear the filter and view all by clicking on the top next to the customers, and I have all my customers listed there. I can easily add a new customer from the customer dashboard, or if I want to, from the drop-down next to new customer, I can import customers. I can print them, I can bring them to Excel, and then my little baby gear icon lets me know how I want to view my listing of customers. So do I want to see a column for address or email? Do I want to include an active? How many rows do I want to see? From our customers individually, we can easily, again, create transactions. So as we go through the workflows, we will do that. Then we have our vendor center. And again, we have a money bar that goes across the top. So what are my potential expenses? So purchase orders that I haven't received against. What are my accounts payable? And then what's been paid within the, what have I paid my vendors in the last 30 days? Again, a listing of all my vendors. I can sort or filter the view by any of my items on the money bar. I can sort it by name, by company, by balance. I can find a vendor by searching in the search box. If I'm using QBO Plus, I can prepare 1099s. I can easily add a new vendor here, as well as import vendors. And then as far as entering transactions, right from here in the vendor center, I could create a bill, I could write a check, or create an expense or a purchase order, make them inactive. If I have a bill, I can also make a payment on that bill. And then we have kind of the same thing for employees. In our sample file, we don't have payroll turned on, but I can list my employees, and if I'm using QuickBooks Online Payroll, I can turn on payroll and get everything all set up, and this is where I would go to actually run payroll, actually run our payroll and make any changes. Now, our transactions on our left-hand nav bar has a little drop-down, and we've got 4 different areas we can look at. 3 of them are places where we can enter transactions. So we have the banking area or bank feed center or dashboard, and we'll go into that next when we talk about our first kind of workflow that we have that will allow us to connect our bank accounts and our credit card accounts to QBO so that it's easy entry or matching with transactions that are already input. We have our sales dashboard or our sales transaction center. It also has a money bar, and pretty much the same thing we saw in the customer center, but instead of seeing the customers listed below, we actually see transactions listed below. Instead of adding a new customer like we did in the customer center, here's where we could add new transactions. So we can do it right from the top, or on something like here's an invoice. If I want to receive payment, I can receive payment from here. So we're in the sales transaction, so the transactions we can do in the sales transaction center are, you guessed it, sales transactions. So again, however it works for us, we want to do that. We have something similar in the expense transactions area. No money bar, but a listing of all of our different expenses. And we can create new purchasing kinds of transactions. So bills, expenses, checks, purchase orders. Again, some of this is dependent on what level of QuickBooks Online that your client has subscribed to there. So we can create transactions from the new transactions, or again, individually. Here's a bill. Well, what would be the next logical step would be to go ahead and make a payment. Purchase order, maybe we want to print it, or we could copy it. So we can look at our individual suggested actions from the actions column. Now, chart of accounts, we're not really entering transactions, but we can add new accounts to our chart of accounts, and we can look up a particular account. If it's a balance sheet account, we can view the register, we can edit the account, we can run a report, we could delete. And by the way, deleting in QBO is not really deleting, it's making something inactive. And then we have our reports area, so that really, if we want to see reports on the transactions we've entered, we would go there. If we were signed up for payroll, this icon on the left-hand nav bar would just say taxes, and I'd have a drop-down for sales tax and payroll taxes. So this is where you would go to create your payroll liability payments or your sales tax liability payments. And then we can easily get connected to the App Center. So again, 3 ways on our general navigation is we're looking on our left-hand navigation bar, we are looking to use Quick Create, or we're trying to do something using the gear icon. So let's go start actually doing our workflows. One workflow that we can use, very, very simple workflow, and should be pretty simple to teach our clients to use, is just utilizing the banking center. And again, when we talk about these common workflows, it's not an end-all or a be-all. Most people, what they end up doing is not using the banking center for everything, but they might be able to, and we'll talk about when to use and how to set it up, and then we'll actually go in and use it. but they might use the Banking Center in conjunction with some of these other workflows that we're going to look at. But I think about, in order to come up with these workflows, I emailed a bunch of the pro advisors and said, how do you teach your clients to use QBO? An overwhelming response was, we definitely teach them how to use the Banking Center. So whether they're using it in conjunction with some other workflow or possibly just using it by itself. So I think about my new business that starts, and they go to buy QuickBooks, and of course if you go out to the QuickBooks website, it says sign up for QuickBooks Online. And they may have a very simple workflow. They just want to record their expenses. I actually have a client that I was setting up that does inventory and wanted to track inventory, and so we got everything all set up, and then she didn't do anything with it. And that was almost a year ago, and she called me a couple weeks ago, and I said, please wait till after tax season, and she did. So on April 16th, she came here and said, you know what, I just need to get my numbers in here because I have to do my taxes, so I just want to know my income and expenses. Well, you know what, using the banking transactions area or the bank feeds is pretty simple to do. Now, these clients are probably cash basis. They probably are using either debit cards or credit cards, or, as I said, you can use the Banking Center to supplement other workflows before reconciling. So our workflow here is to use the Banking Center and accept the transactions and then reconcile the bank account. Now, part of accepting the transactions is actually going in and making sure payees are assigned and the accounts on the chart of accounts are assigned. So when we're talking about setting up our bank feeds, basically what you do is you go to the transactions on the left-hand nav bar, right? That's one of the places where we go look, and click on banking, and it opens up this bank feed center. Then you are going to click on add an account. What it will require you to do is, you don't see it on the screenshot here, but the first thing it requires you to do is type in the name of your bank or your credit card company, and then the screen will come up where you actually log into your bank. I was doing this with a client. They're like, well, I've never logged into my bank online. I'm like, okay, well, I don't think this is going to work. You have to go to your bank website and set up a login so that we can do it here. So then you put in your user ID and your password for your bank and click on login. And then what it will ask you to do is once it does that connection, it will say, okay, what account in QuickBooks do you want to hook this up with? I guess my little box isn't quite right there. So, you know, if this is a credit card account, I'm going to link it with a credit card account, one of my credit card accounts that I've already set up on my chart of accounts. And really that is as easy as it is to set it up. Now, the default is for the bank to download 90 days worth of transactions, and you need to figure out, I mean, this is where at the beginning on the setup where some of our clients get a little bit confused, because if they haven't used the bank feeds before, but they've been entering things in QuickBooks Online and they've been reconciling their bank and their credit card accounts, they probably don't want to download 90 days worth of transactions, because what happens in the Bank Feed Center is QuickBooks tries to match up with transactions that are already entered, but if those transactions are already reconciled, it won't even look at already reconciled transactions because it says, well, it's already reconciled. So you would have to exclude them in the Bank Feed Center so that they don't get duplicates in QBO. Now, so it happens. You know, I mean, if our clients are not calling us until after the fact saying, I've got all these duplicate transactions, I don't know what to do with it, that's probably what happened on there. So if they are current in QBO, I do 0 days or maybe 7 days. I very rarely do 90 days unless they're a new business. So new business and new to using QBO on there. When you look at the troubleshooting module and the QBO certification, that's one of the troubleshooting is, well, why do I have these duplicate transactions and how do I get rid of them? And that would be a good class for you to take. So I don't know how many of you are QBO certified, but the QBO certification webinar is a 4-hour webinar, or the modules are being offered individually. It's really a 5-class course that you can self-paced training, or you can take a live webinar. And there are, if you go out to the Intuit Academy, you'll find that there are, each module is kind of offered on its own, and you don't have to take them in any particular order. And this common workflows is kind of based off of the module 2, which is recording transactions. But recording transactions in the QBO cert isn't really about workflow necessarily. It's just more about where do I find everything and how do I do things in QBO. So let's talk about using bank feeds. So when we're talking about using bank feeds, there are some things that we want to turn on. And actually, I'm going to just switch back into QBO so we can go into our banking area and take a look at it. So kind of my setup after you do the connection of the bank feeds, before I do anything, is I come over to the baby gear icon and I say, copy the description into the memo of the check. So what that's saying is that here's the description that came down from the bank. I want it in the memo of the transactions in QBO. Because I will tell you something else that I see clients make a mistake on, and that is that they forget to put the payee in. So if the payee is in the description, that's going to help me try and figure out who it was that they paid and go back in later and assign the payee to the transaction. So that's the first thing I do. Again, baby gear icon, make sure to copy the description. The next thing that I think is important to do is to set up some bank rules. And you do that, it's not intuitive on here, by going to your drop-down next to your update icon at the top and click on Manage Rules. And the reason that I think this is a good idea is because you want to automate this process as much as you possibly can. So if I say it contains staples, I want it to go to office supplies, then when my client comes into the bank feeds area, it will already have staples as the payee and office supplies as the expense account, and it will be a recognized transaction, and they just really basically have to review it and accept it. Because remember, if we're talking about using bank feeds solely, there's not going to be a lot of matches because they're not putting they're not really putting information in QBO. Again, most people are going to do a combination of bank feeds, but there may be those clients who all they want to do are get the transactions in here and post to income and expense or wherever it needs to be posted. So bank feeds will work for them 100% of the time. So when I'm in my rules, I can create a new rule. And it says, what is the rule name? And my rule name is going to be for a rental, and it's for money out, but I can set it for money in or money out. I can say just bank accounts or specific bank accounts or specific credit card account. And then when a transaction meets all or any of these conditions, and by the way, you can have some pretty complex banking rules. You know, if it's less than $1,000, post it to office supplies. If it's greater than $1,000, post it to equipment. So I'm going to say if the description contains a rental, and I think about like Staples or FedEx, that Staples has the store number as part of the name. FedEx has the transaction number as part of the name. So I like that it has, if it contains a rental, I want it to be an expense type of transaction, so that means it could either reduce the bank account or the credit card account. And my payee is going to be a rental, which I don't have yet, so I'm going to add them as a vendor and save. And my category or my expense account is going to be equipment rental. Now here's another really cool thing about the bank rules, and that is that you can split the bank rules, you can split the transactions by either percentage or dollar amount. So, think about your cable company bill. You may have everything, right? You have internet, you have phone, you have cable, and you want to split them among different accounts on your chart of accounts. You could either split by a percentage or a dollar amount, which would be kind of cool on there. We're not going to do that. We're just creating a very simple rule. But again, I mean, you can have pretty complex rules because you can add lines here to really change the parameters. So description, bank text, amount, contains, is exactly, does not contain. I like that one. And then add more lines and set that up. And then I save my bank rule. So copy description, set up your bank rules, and then you're pretty ready to go. So I'm going to go back to my bank and credit cards. So as I look at the banking area, I have my bank accounts and credit cards that are connected. Again, we saw the screen before where we could add an account. I have my rules set up. I said to copy the description. And right now, I'm on the checking account, and I have 25 transactions to review. On the bottom, as we move down our screen here, we see the new transactions. We can see any transactions that have already been added through bank feeds into QuickBooks or any excluded transactions. These two pages, and again, we're in a sample file, so it all resets. We don't have anything in here, will really help you when you're troubleshooting because you can see what was added in QuickBooks and what's been excluded. And if something is excluded, you can actually say undo it, so it goes back to my new transactions page, and then put it into QuickBooks, or vice versa. So those duplicate transactions, if they were added through bank feeds, I can undo it and say exclude them. But let's go back to our new transactions. When we're looking at our new transactions, we have a couple tabs here, and one is for all transactions, and that's what we're looking at right now. But you want to train your client to start out with recognized transactions. Now, these are transactions that are recognized because of a rule. So the rule that I just set up for a rental on there, if it was already entered into QuickBooks before, not through banking, right? They just went in and they recorded a deposit or a bill payment or refund or whatever on there. It looks for a match when you download the banking transactions. Or it may be, and we don't have any right here, it may just be because I've used that vendor or a customer before and I've categorized it, and it would suggest that you probably want to do it the same this time. So it kind of remembers, right? So as you teach your client to come down here and say, that's right, a rental, I want it to go to equipment rental. These look like they match. Review them briefly. They all look okay. Again, how simple is this that I can say check mark all of these, and under my batch actions say accept selected, or pick and choose what I want to check on there. And then I know that I have got a couple weird things in here. This is what happens when you have a sample file. When I look at these, I'm like, well, what's that for? Well, books by Bessie, for whatever reason, should it go to legal and professional fees? That's kind of weird. So the bank detail says books by Bessie, and that's what will be in the memo. But we have Pam Seitz here as who the payee is, and going to professional fees anyways, sample company. And then when I look at my match my bill payment, so the reason this one didn't match, it says it's a possible match because I may have other bills. So I see that I have a client who writes 2 checks for $1,000 every month to 2 different payees, and there's not enough of the description that comes down from the bank for QBO to know how to match it up. So they're not going to automatically match it. They're going to say, well, you know what, you may have a possible match, so if this is not correct, then go ahead and find other matching transactions. Now, I don't know what I have on here. Mine looks like it's okay, but you can see when you're trying to find a matching transaction, you can show everything, or you can just show open bills, checks, bill payments. You can search. You can set the time period that you're looking at. But I'm going to say that, yes, this is a match, and click on match, and then I am here, and wow, look at that. I have no unrecognized transactions. So now that I've gone through all the recognized, I can come back to my all and say, okay, what's not here, right? What hasn't been entered? Well, a rental, when we set our rule for deductions from the bank account, not increases. So QuickBooks knows, because we've used a rental in the payee, remember it was a brand new payee we added, that on our expense transactions that it was a rental. It kind of assumes, but it doesn't know what income account to post it to. And in our case, it was, see, backhoe deposit refund, like that. And so I'm just going to put it back against equipment rental. And I can click on Add. And then I would go through each one of these. So you can see that it's easy. We get both deposits and expenses in, and then we are ready to go. And you could do everything that way. So you would take care of these 6 transactions. You would click on your savings account. This is going to, looks like it's a match. So I check mark it, and I click on match. I come over here to my MasterCard. We've got 3 recognized transactions of transactions that we've already entered. They look okay. I'm going to accept selected, come over to my all, see what else I have, and then record them. I mean, so it makes it really pretty easy. The bank feeds are just awesome in QBO. I think a lot easier to use than the bank feeds that we have in desktop. And by the way, when you set up the bank feeds in QBO, it actually checks once a day or once in the evening. So when you come in the next morning, the day before's transactions are there, or you can click on update and manually update on there. So what are we doing here? So we have Amazon. Who's our payee? We'll put Amazon as our payee. How could Amazon not be set up as a vendor, man? Certainly set up in my QuickBooks file. And where do I want to post this? Maybe I post it. I don't have office spelled with 3 F's. To my office expenses, so you can add. You can also try and find a match. So finding a match says, okay, what are you looking? Well, in this case, they couldn't find anything for the date and the search criteria set above. So anything that looked like it would match didn't come up. So I could either change my search criteria or say, okay, well, that's not going to work. I must have to add it manually. Now, if I have a transfer, that it was transfer from one of my QBO accounts to another, from checking to savings, from checking to the MasterCard, I could actually record the transfer and then say what other, what's the other account. Maybe it was my loan payment, put it against my loan payment. I'm not going to do that here. It's not a transfer. So I'm going to do Amazon, office expenses, and add. So these are kind of all the things that you need to train your clients to do. The other thing that you want to make sure that they know is if maybe somehow this has to be split among different accounts. I can easily do that by clicking on the split. The payee is probably going to be the same, but maybe some of this is office expense and some of this is cleaning supplies or whatever on there. So I can split those transactions. And then, again, I would click on Add. So easy way to get all of our transactions in, right? Because all of our transactions, with the exception if we have to do journal entries, are going through either our bank accounts or our credit card accounts. So as long as we can set them up, we're ready to go. The last thing I want to show you here before we go to the next step is to just briefly mention this file upload. So QBO links with a ton of banks. I mean, really, I don't know how many there are, a ton, however many that is. But if by some chance it does not match up to your bank or your client's bank, if you can get a desktop file, which is a .qbo file, not to be confused with QuickBooks Online, it just happens to have that file extension, or QFX or OFX or even CSV file format, you can export from, log onto your bank site, do the export, and then save it, and then upload that file here, and then all those transactions, they won't be in QBO, but they'll be here in this kind of holding area in the banking area for you to approve and set the payee and categorize or match or do whatever needs to be done. So if we enter everything through the banking center, the next thing that we need to do is reconcile. And what I will tell you is that reconciling is really easy in QBO when you're using bank feeds. So to reconcile, if we're our client, we are going to go under our gear icon and we're going to click on Reconcile. Now this one I know doesn't have anything and mine is not going to balance, but I'll just show you what happens here. So if I go to checking and I say Reconcile Now, and I don't know what I'm going to set my statement ending date at. We'll try 12/31/14, put in my ending balance for my bank statement. I click on OK. What you will, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Let's edit the information. Let's go to today. Click on OK. What you will see is anything that I entered through the banking center is already checkmarked. So again, think about it. If your client is entering everything through the banking center, when they go to reconcile, everything is going to be listed there, and their difference should be 0. Now, one of the tricks for that is to make sure you say hide the transactions after the statement's end date, because they may have matched or entered transactions through the banking area after the statement ending date, and they'll still be checkmarked. So if I don't checkmark this hide transactions after the statement's end date, then their difference is not going to be 0. My difference is almost 0. Pretty cool. I'm going to cancel out of here, but you get the idea how easy it would be to reconcile when we're using the banking center. I do want to cancel. Okay, so we were here, we were there, we were there, and we reconcile. So the other place where we can reconcile from is from our Accounts and Tools. So it makes it easy. So let's talk about some purchasing workflows. Scenario 1, don't track accounts payable. So you write checks or you enter credit card charges. Now, in that case, I might just go ahead and use the Bank Feed Center, but if you write checks, you got to write them out in QuickBooks. So we're going to use Quick Create to write and print the checks, and then to enter our credit card charges, we're going to use the Expense Center. So to write and print checks using Quick Create, and I'll just flip back over, I come into Quick Create, and under my vendors, I have a check type of transaction. So I'm teaching my client to use Quick Create. I put in who am I writing the check to. I am writing the check to Cal's telephone, and where do I want it to post to telephone expense, and it's $187.35, not billable, and I enter it. Now, right now, this is saying I'm entering it after the fact. I would never do that. I'd just use the bank feeds. But if I need to print it, I'm going to mark it print to print later. And then what happens, I create my next check, and this is to Chin's Gas and Oil. Last time I wrote them, it was to maintenance and repair for $185. This time it's $179.35, and I have it marked to be printed later. It's coming out of my checking account, and I'm going to click on Save and Close. So now I have these checks to print. If I want to batch print, I'm going to use Quick Create. So Quick Create is where I can come and say, I want to print all the checks that are marked to be printed later. It will, first time through, it will say, make sure everything's lined up. I mark which checks I want to print. I put in my beginning check number, and then I would click on Preview and Print. And it gives me my preview. I print them off, and I go ahead and click on Print, and then it will come back and say, did these checks print okay? Yes, they all printed correctly. I'm done. I have no more batch. Well, I've overdrawn my bank account, but I have no more checks to print on there. Now, the other thing we might want to do is to enter credit card charges. And that, I'm just going to show you, we're going to do from the Expenses Center. So the Expenses Center, we are going to use a transaction called an expense transaction. So an expense transaction is kind of unique to QBO because what it is saying is I want to record this purchase transaction, and if it's a debit card, I can say I want to reduce the checking. If it's a credit card, I want to increase my credit card liability. And then what happens here is Ellis equipment rental. Do I want to pre-fill? Nope, I'm not going to do that. I put in, I can say that I paid it with my MasterCard on there, what the payment date is, what this was for, equipment rental. Oops, that's a lot. And then I save it, right? Actually, I can save and close it on there. So as I'm looking at using an expense transaction, so we've done all of this, what happens is if I choose a credit card account, it's going to create a credit card transaction. If you choose a bank account, you can either record a check or a debit card transaction. Now, what happens if we do want to track accounts payable? Well, our workflow is going to be enter bills, pay bills. And in this case, again, you figure it out yourself. We're going to use the Vendor Center to enter the bills, and we're going to use Quick Create to pay the bills. So I'm going to go into my Vendor Center. And the reason I chose the Vendor Center to enter the bills is because I'm probably going through today's mail, right? And I'm entering, I don't have a whole stack for one vendor. I'm just starting, I'm just entering them. And I've got all my vendors listed here. So Hicks Hardware, I'm going to simply from the Suggested Action tab, put in the bill and what this was for. This was for supplies, and how much is it for? And if I want to invoice a customer for it, I could mark it billable. And then I click on Save and New. Now, in this case, I then can go in and Computers by Jenny. I don't know if I have subcontracts. No. See if I have computers. She did some computer repairs for me. And it costs that much. And I just keep entering them, right? I'm going through my stack of bills, and I've got them all in. So I have my bills in, and one of the cool things I have here is now I have my listing of payables. I see I have 7 open bills. 4 of them are overdue. Now, I can easily make a payment directly from my Vendor Center. But what I like about using Quick Create is that when I click on Pay Bills from Quick Create, all of my bills come up. So I can batch pay my bills together rather than doing it one by one from the Vendor Center or the Expense Transaction Center on here. So I'm showing all bills due on or before. I can select all. What's my payment date? And then pay the bills or pay and print the bills. So payment account, this is coming from MasterCard, or I can say, nope, I'm paying it out of my checking. And then if I'm paying it out of my checking, am I printing it? and then I would put print a check, click on pay and print, and it's just like printing our checks before. So I'm just going to click on pay bills, and we've got it. Okay, let's move back. So the reason that we have all these screenshots is because you've got access to the PowerPoint slides by the little, it was in your confirmation email as well as in the chat box here. So depending on which level of QBO you have, you can mark the expenses billable and assign it to a customer. You can use items, or you can post directly to the general ledger account. So if you're paying multiple bills, use Quick Create. If you want to just pay one bill, you can use the Vendor Center or the Expense Transaction Center. Oh, we've got our CPE keywords. So, whoa, we don't have that much time left. So we have our CPE keyword, and our CPE keyword is the word wolf. If you've taken any webinars before, you know that once we go off of this slide, the word wolf will never be spoken again, but you will see it on the poll at the end. So I encourage you to write down the word wolf, because wolf is our CPE keyword. Wolf going once, wolf going twice, wolf, I am moving off the CPE keyword. Okay, sales work. We're going to do it. In our case, we're going to Quick Create to create invoices. We're going to use the Customer Center to receive payment, and we're going to use Quick Create, because we have to make the deposits. So as we look at this, Quick Create, it goes under our Customers column. We go ahead and we click on Invoice, and then we record the invoice. Now, one of the things I really like about QBO is that if I've entered expense transactions, or I've entered billable time, or I've entered something called a delayed charge, that I have said I want it to go, in this case, to Amy's Bird Sanctuary, a little drawer will open up that will prompt our clients to add those billable expenses or delayed charges to the invoice. So I have a client that I just set up on QBO that's a pool company. They do, in the summer, they do a lot of maintenance. You know, they come clean your pool once a week. They only want to invoice once a month. So they're going to come home every day or go back to their office every day and enter a delayed charge saying, here's a listing of all the pools that I cleaned today. So at the end of the month, when they create an invoice, their little drawer is going to open up, and it's going to have all the times that they have cleaned somebody's pool, and they can easily just say add all, or they can add them individually. So receiving payment, I chose to receive payment from the Customer Center because, again, I'm thinking that you get a pile of checks. And by the way, if you email your invoices out through QBO, you can, and especially if you sign up for QuickBooks Payments, you can have all of that automated, because your client can pay via a link, and then either by ACH or credit card, whatever you allow them to do, and then it automatically comes back and marks it paid in QBO, and there's not much you have to do on there. So the receipt payment, I'm just using the Customer Center because I've got it's the customer list. And again, remember we have this search box, so I can, Amy's is the top one, but I can easily come in here and type in the customer name, see that there's an open invoice, and then click on Receive Payment. So because I am doing it from the Customer Center, this is already going to be filled in. We want to make sure the payment date is correct, the payment method, the reference number, and then where do you want it to post to? So it's not like desktop where you can say everything has to go to undeposited funds. You can set that preference. In QBO, you're going to have a deposit to. So if this check for $239 is going to be its own separate deposit, and I'm going down today, I probably would say deposit it directly to the bank account. But if I have a stack of checks, I'm going to post it to undeposited funds. Transactions that I check mark what exactly did she pay? Well, she paid invoice number 1021, and then we don't see it on here, and then she would go click on Save and Close, get back to the Customer Center, and find her next customer. And then the next step is to make a deposit, and that you use Quick Create. That's where we find bank deposits. And when we look at our Make Deposit, at the top, anything that's in undeposited funds is automatically going to show up. So as long as I've received payment, that's going to show up here. And if I have to add a new deposit, because also in my stack of checks I have an insurance refund, I can add that at the bottom of my screen to come up with a deposit total. And I see what bank account it's going to go on. So scenario 2 for our sales workflows is getting paid at the time of service. So what might I do there? If I want to look at my sales reports, I'm probably going to create a sales receipt, and we're going to do that through the Sales Transaction Center, and then I'm going to make a deposit, right? Could just do a deposit, but I think the sales receipts give you better reporting because you can put items on there that would give you an idea of what you received for. So sales receipt using the Sales Center or Sales Transactions area, that's under our left-hand nav bar. I'm going to click on New Transaction and Sales Receipt. And then when I do that, sales receipt means I get paid at the time of sale. I put in the customer name. I put in the address and the date. I can put in the payment method. And then if they're paying by check, I'd probably put in the reference number. And then where do I want to deposit it to? Again, own separate deposit today, I'd probably put it directly into the bank account. But if I'm lumping it together with other transactions, other checks that I've received today or cash, I would post it to undeposited funds. And then I choose which products and services, and I can have multiple lines on here. And they paid it, right? So the amount received was $937.50. The balance due is 0 because the sales receipt is getting paid at the time of sale. To make a deposit, we have to use Quick Create. And we see on our selecting existing payments, we had posted it to undeposited funds, so that sales receipt shows up here. I would check mark off what's going into the bank, what bank is it going into, what's the date. Now, any recurring transactions you might want to record, and you do that by going to your gear icon and then lists and recurring transactions. This is one of the ways we can enter it. So this is kind of outside of our normal workflow, but something we want to set up for our clients for recurring transactions. If it's happening every month and the dollar amount is the same, we're going to have it automatically enter. So here's our delayed charge. That is a non-posting transaction that we can pull onto the invoice, like my pool person on there. This example is for weekly gardening service, so it takes 4 hours a week to do that, and I can schedule it, and I can schedule it to go in weekly, and then I'm ready to go. So our last couple minutes here, and I know we don't have very much time, is to talk about the accountant toolbox. So tools that help us make our life a little bit easier. And when we're looking at the accountant toolbox, in the new QBOA, so what you see when you're logging in as the accountant user might be a little bit different than what you're seeing on the screen, because the new QBOA has not rolled out to everybody. But in the new QBOA, we have this little briefcase that gives us all of our accountant tools. In the old QBOA, when you click on your gear icon, you have an extra panel that opens up besides the ones that we saw with, the tools and the settings and the company information, that has your accountant tools. Plus, above home, you have an accountant home, and we've got even more tools there. These are tools because we're the accountant user that Intuit gives us to help troubleshoot our client. So you have things like batch reclassify. So you can close the books from here. It actually brings you to your company settings, which is where you close the books. And you would check the close the books. It's under the advanced tab, but it brings you directly there. So that's why it's nice to do it from the toolbox. You would set the closing date and then hopefully set a closing date password. Another tool that I think it's really important to know about is your reports tools, because what that allows you to do is set the default so when you pull up the reports, in this case it's always last month that comes up. So it kind of makes it easy. So every time I pull up a report, last month will be relative to today's date. This is just a sample screenshot. And also from when you click on report tools, you have information on the reconciliation status, what the reconciled balance is, what the current balance is, when it was last reconciled, and you can get actually to the reconciliation history and reports where you can reconcile now. Now another tool that we have, because we are the accountant user, is we have the ability to undo bank reconciliations. So if our client made a lot of changes to already reconciled transactions, or if they forced a reconciliation, which is what shows up in the auto adjustment, you know, the difference was not zero, they cannot undo a bank rec, but we can by clicking on undo. So net changes. What I like about it when you click on net changes is you get a listing of the changed transactions. So what the original amount is, what the current amount is, and what was changed. This was deleted, but I could recreate it, and this was the dollar amount change. Dollar amount change, I can actually go in and change it back to what it was when I reconciled. Auto adjustment, again, that means it's a forced reconciliation. And then, as I said, undo reconciliation is an accountant's only tool. Now, with the new QBOA, we have something that's called the client switcher that allows us to switch between different clients. So if Joshua Tree, somebody from Joshua Tree called me and said, hey, can you log into my QuickBooks real quick? I don't have to go back to my accountant home, find Joshua Tree, and click on it. When I'm in GoldenEye LLC, I look at this drop-down, and I would just simply click on Joshua Tree, and it would bring me into Joshua Tree's QBO file. And then when I was done, I would click on the client switcher and go back into GoldenEye. And then you have a lot of other cool, and again, Module 4 of the QBO cert, things like reclassifying transactions, looking at voided and deleted transactions, being able to write off invoices in batch, and create journal entries are also under the accountant tools. So that was it in a nutshell. Hey, wow, we have 3 minutes left. I can go back and see if there's any questions on here. We did put a resource slide, because the webinars, if you go out to intuitacademy.com, if you are using QBO are not signed up for the QBO blog, I highly recommend that you do that, because mainly, I mean, not only do you get some really good articles, but the reason that I like it is that Intuit puts new features in QBO, you know, every 4 to 6 weeks. And the first thing that, how you find out about it is that as soon as they put it in, they publish something on the QBO blog. So I can keep up with what the changes are in QBO. There's also an Intuit Accountant blog. There's Quickipedia. And then this is just a link to the test drive file, or just Google it. And then lastly, I don't know if you have heard, I guess if you've taken webinars lately, you may have heard about QuickBooks Connect. So, or if you were at QuickBooks Connect 2014, it was really a very, very awesome event on there. It was held in San Jose, as it will be this year, and it was for small businesses, so it can be your clients, for yourselves, for developers, for Intuit folks. There were some really cool motivational speakers, and then there were training tracks that you could switch back and forth between the tracks just to increase your knowledge. And then, you know, you can talk to vendors, and because they have vendors there. The food was fabulous. So I was really excited that Intuit decided to do it again. And actually, we don't have the link on here, but if you go to qbcon2015.com, so qbcon2015.com, you give your name and your email address, and as more information becomes available, it doesn't mean you're signing up to come, but as more information becomes available, you will get notification on what's going on there, which would be pretty cool. Okay, I think that's it. What I'm going to do is put up the poll for you and launch that. And meanwhile, I'm going to see if I can look through the questions to see if there are any questions here that I can answer in these last couple minutes. I want to thank you all for attending today. I hope you found it of value. Any suggestions that you have, we are completely open to it. This was the first presentation of this common workflows, so I, for one, would really appreciate your feedback on that. I think that'd be really cool. Let's see, questions. So what do we have to say? Sorry, I'm looking through the questions while you guys are answering. Oh, and this person is offline, so Emily, I didn't know you were on here, so I think, and Woody, I didn't know you were on here either. So I thank Woody and Emily for answering questions in the background because that really took care of a lot of things for us. And you guys had lots of questions, so thank you, really, on here. You want to make sure that you invite your client, have your client invite you as the accountant user so you get those accountant tools. And once again, I want to say, as I'm reading through the questions, is that these are just suggested workflows. You have to know your client, know the features that they need, you know, what is their workflow, like what is their workflow currently, and try and figure out what's the best way to do that workflow in QBO. Because, you know, we know you can do Quick Create for everything. Is that true? Yeah, I think it is on there. Or you can use the company or the sales center for your sales transactions, or the expenses or vendor center for all your other transactions. What I like about using the centers is the ability to look at that money bar, both on the customer side and on the vendor side, and looking at the filters, so that may be helpful to you. Okay, I am going to close the poll, and again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Go out to the Intuit Academy and see what else is out there, and I hope to see you at another webinar. Or if you come to QuickBooks Connect, come find me because I will be there. So good luck. I'm going to close the poll, and I am going to end the webinar. Thank you so much for attending.